So we have a two-sided referral scheme that incentivizes our active audiences to get in their friends and family who might be interested in the product. We found that at least for a product that is in the early stages, this is definitely one of the best predictors of how it'll perform in the future. If you have that golden cohort slash core audience that really loves your product, was willing to give you feedback on it, also invite their friends and family to it, that is a very encouraging sign.
How do you grow when you're already giant? Hello and welcome to Mobile Heroes Uncensored. Today we're chatting with the VP of Growth for a true giant. This company has 550 million monthly users. Pretty sure that's a very short list of companies globally that hit that size. They spend 128 billion monthly minutes. That's about 250,000 years of time every single month. And of course, they also have 67 billion monthly page views. Peggy, who are we chatting with today?
A giant, John. Massive.
Mental
Massive indeed.
giant.
Mental giant. Because it's everything. This is a company that has it all, literally. And we're going to be talking to Vivek Girotra. He is Vice President of Growth Marketing at Times Internet. That is the company. He himself, an accomplished marketing leader with a proven track record, accelerating growth for world-class companies. His experience is across 3 continents with diverse cross-cultural teams at companies including Machine Zone, 21st Century Fox, and Elevate Labs. And as a person and an individual, he has a strong background in building companies and teams from the ground up. That's why he has a laser focus now at Times Internet doing exactly that. And that is the global giant, John. Internet, entertainment, soon to come fintech, but I won't go there. That's going to give it all away because he is currently launching a new fintech product for immigrants and scaling international expansion for the Times Group worldwide, the entire portfolio of global businesses. Got a lot on your plate. Welcome, Vivek.
Thank you, Peggy and John. It's a pleasure to be here, and really appreciate the kind words. I've myself been following both of you in the mobile circuit and community for a while now, so it's really awesome to be able to connect on a platform like this one.
Wonderful. Well, we're super happy to have you. And we got to get a little more information on this company. Clearly, it's huge and immensely popular in one of the most populous nations on the planet, but maybe not as well known everywhere else. What is Times Internet? Give us the snapshot.
Sure. So, Times Internet is the digital arm of the Times Group, which has nothing to do with the New York Times, but it is a privately owned 200-year-old media group based out of India. It started out with the Times of India newspaper 200 odd years ago during the British era, which, by the way, is still the world's largest English daily. And from then on, it's branched out into other forms of media, TV, radio, film, digital, and so on. We also have a presence in the US through different entities. So one is the US sales team, early stage VC arm called Brand Capital Worldwide, which does very interesting media for equity deals, a late stage equity arm called Times Bridge, and then a special ops team, which includes people like me that work on projects that are really focused on the international audience.
So it's a massive media company and there's tons of brands and there's a lot of different components there. You're now diversifying, as Peggy kind of hinted at, into fintech. Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the combination of the two is more complementary than you think. So, one is that we're in 2022. So, the last decade was the decade of building in fintech, right? All the underlying pipes and technologies, they got modularized, they have become APIs, and you literally have companies that are built on BaaS platform, which is banking as a service. So from a pure product standpoint, there's actually very little that can be offered as a differentiation. So where you see fintech heading to nowadays is more of a affinity marketing route. So you have examples like First Boulevard, which is a neobank that is focused on the Black community. You have Daylight, which is a neobank that is focused on the LGBTQ population. So these are, the differentiator that are coming across to create that viable proposition in the fintech space. And this is where we think that our brand, the Times brand, which has 200-year-old history and goodwill amongst the South Asian population, has an immense chance of succeeding. The second is CAC. We know fintech is a brutal space. Like any of the major neobanks, they're paying close to $200 per first deposit at this point. So any leg up that you can get on the distribution aspect gives you a very asymmetrical competitive advantage. And given that we have the distribution built in, that really helps us to subsidize our CAC and make us much more viable in the space. And the third thing is just nailing specific use cases, because this is an audience that we know intimately. Because of our existing media properties, because of the product that we have, at present, we know their behaviors, their mentality. So we are very confident that we can nail the specific use cases and what they might find useful from a neobank.
That's very interesting, because you're seeing, in a sense, the content they're interacting with as Times Internet. So you know what they're interested in. You're talking about affinity, again, South Asian audiences. So that's the audience for the app, but you've also done some research into expats, particularly in the US. What's a top finding you can share there?
Let me answer this in two parts, right? So the first is just a little bit more on the audience, right? So there's 32 million Indians outside India. If you expand the definition loosely to South Asians, because they're culturally they're very similar, that gives you almost 45 million people that are outside the subcontinent. So that's a significant audience. And the app as it stands right now, it's called Times Club. It takes the form of a rewards app, where if you transact with brands that are very culturally relevant to you in terms of fashion, groceries, streaming services, and so on, you get your rewards and so on. And the way the funnel works is that we actually ask them to link their bank account or credit card via Plaid. So that gives us really deep insight into their past purchase behavior. So this is where we kind of started out to see if this concept does have any legs or not. But our ambitions are bigger. So we are trying to branch out into a financial super app. So if you look at it from a macro standpoint, the first stage was, how do we get a look into their wallet? So that is by connecting their existing card or bank account. The second is, how do we get a share of their wallet, which is by establishing this direct relationship and trust with them, getting them to transact on these one-off offers, and so on. The third stage, which we're heading into, how do we become the wallet? And so I think that is the kind of pathway we're moving towards. And towards this end, we conducted a lot of interesting research involving ethnographic studies, full-on customer immersion. And there's some really interesting data that comes across, right? From a more demographic standpoint, we found that this audience has 2x the median household income in the US. So, this is a very different audience from the Chime and the Day, where they need protection from overdraft fees and so on. They're also 70% more likely to have an advanced degree. So again, a very highly educated net worth audience. We did some deeper research, which also go into psychographics, and I think that is the really insightful piece for me, is that three really key points emerge from here. So one is, there is this concept of blending in versus standing out. Immigrants who used to come to the USA 40, 50 years ago, they would congregate in their own nooks and corners there, the Chinatown, Little India, whereas now the newer migrant doesn't feel the need to hide in that comfortable familiarity, but they're okay with just being themselves amongst the new cultural background. I think the second is also this concept of a siloed versus hybrid identity. For someone like me who's been out of the country for more than a decade, right? I feel too foreign for America, but I'm also too alien for India at this point, because I've lived.
Tough.
So
Mhm.
So this creates this sort of amalgamation and at a very deep core identity level that you kind of belong to two places at once, but you still don't necessarily belong anywhere. uh, and the third thing is this concept of repression versus expression. The initial stereotype of, for example, South Asian was this, nerdy engineers who could, had difficulty communicating, and now we're in this era where the CEOs of the biggest tech companies are, all from the subcontinent, and they're so
Mhm.
it's a very different diaspora in terms of both demographics and psychographics, and that's what we're so excited about is that there's a huge opportunity here if you can build something that speaks to them from a product and a marketing standpoint.
What a super interesting Mobile Heroes Uncensored we're having. Usually we're going deep
Yeah.
into the details of marketing, mobile apps, and maybe CPMs, maybe in-app purchases, maybe many other things, ad monetization, whatever the case may be. And we're going to get to some of that stuff because that is really critical and important. But what we're also getting treated to here is kind of an insider's viewpoint into building an experience, building a product, tailoring it to an audience, understanding an audience deeply, all of maybe the more traditional marketing stuff, which is absolutely critical to building something that has long-term success. Getting
I'd
back to
add
some of
one
the
thing to it, John. I have to add one thing to it that's even more exciting.
even
He's
more.
making it even more exciting because I'm thinking about this the whole time, and he's talking about a population that is significant and is transnational. And
Mhm.
I've also been talking to some companies who are saying, for example, Philippines, right? The Filipinos, they live in 120 countries around the world.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be great to have an app that speaks to all of them? Because it's a different type of audience. So it is exciting to
Mm-hmm.
find out more about the motivations of an audience because it's without borders. It's without limits.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Cool. Now, coming back a little bit more to some of the stuff that we typically talk about on Mobile Heroes Uncensored, you come from the gaming world. Machine Zone is on your resume, a few other companies like that. I always had a huge respect for Machine Zone. I think they're one of the first companies to really crack growth at scale via mobile
Mm-hmm.
mechanics. What translates from that world to what you're doing right now?
So I think gaming is great because you're always on the bleeding edge of performance marketing. Unless you have the virality of Fortnite, games will live and die by performance marketing. So it's almost an existential threat over there. If you do not succeed at performance marketing, you will die. Uh, so I think the three main, I would say, transferable skills I've taken from there is one, really the deep technical understanding of the mobile, MarTech stack and infrastructure. I from my time in Machine Zone, I was actually part of the crew that discovered click injections, and we recovered more than $3 million in fraud from different vendors. I'm part of 4 patents in mobile fraud myself, so that was just an amazing time to be a part of the ecosystem because really got deep into attribution, clicks, and how the entire endpoints, how they interact with each other, how the bad actors are taking advantage through different malware and so on. So that has definitely served me well as I moved on to other companies and gone to slightly more senior roles from then on. The second kind of related is just the analytical rigor. I think as performance marketers and from gaming are going to different companies, they bring with them this really deep analytical rigor of how do we create a hypothesis, how do we conduct a test, how do we decide when enough is enough, and how do we just keep moving from there. Uh, and the third is this philosophy of constant iteration. You're never fully done. But that is something which I've taken from my gaming days. But also interestingly, life has kind of come full circle for me because I started out my career on the ad agency side in Ogilvy, which is part of the WPP group. And in my role here, I'm taking care of brand UA as well as lifecycle marketing. So in a kind of nice way, it's brought together the whole left brain, right brain skill sets from my past experience into this new brand that you're trying to build.
Love it.
So you're bringing the analytical rigor, as you put it, but you also have a deep understanding of your audience from your research, from just understanding your audience, the South Asian audience, and you want to give them a borderless experience. Tell me how you're approaching this.
That's a great question because we often talk about these positioning statements and they just seem like you know mumbo jumbo or fluffy marketing as we like to call it in performance. So I think the positioning of borderless is very deliberate for us. So this kind of comes alive in two different forms. One is from a pure product level, right? So what transforms into borderless experience for this audience? So things like seamless money transfer, and this could be even using crypto rails in the background, right? You could have joint accounts with the family back home, so that they could just effectively spend from your account using a card. There are a lot of students who come from South Asia to the US and they can't get a credit card because they don't have a social security number. So what if we use their credit scores from their back home and give them some sort of a credit card or bank account here that they can kind of start using to build up their credit score as soon as they land in the country. So creating that truly borderless experience for the expat comes alive in the product in that way. So that is more literal. The second is a little bit more metaphorical. So that's where the marketing comes in. And this isn't fully fleshed out yet, but where I'm trying to go is create this sense of nostalgia and appreciation for the past. At the same time, this sense of optimism and ambition for the future. So trying to kind of bridge your past and your future in a way that really resonates emotionally with this audience.
Wow. That is really, really cool. And you can imagine that actually working with different audiences as well. You can imagine that working. You mentioned the Philippines, all right, Peggy? And I'm sure there's other nations that have large audiences of expats. I bet you there's a lot of Americans all over the world. And so, of course, you're going to go with the audience that you are first targeting and do that, but it might be extensible. As you go on that path, user acquisition, client acquisition is, of course, very, very critical. How are you feeling the funnel?
That's a great question, and that is obviously a lot of my energy is always focused on answering this one. So the first is really building a really strong incentive funnel and the K factor as we call it. So we have a two-sided referral scheme that incentivizes our active audiences to get in their friends and family as well who might be interested in the product. We've found that at least for a product that is in the early stages, this is definitely one of the best predictors of how it'll perform in the future. If you have that golden cohort / core audience that really loves your product, was willing to give you feedback on it, also invite their friends and family to it, that is a very encouraging sign. The second is, given that we're aiming for a very narrow audience, right? We have to be agile with our media selection because some of the traditional, you can't simply just set a campaign on Facebook or Google and sleep on it. So things like direct mail, for all the people who cry themselves hoarse about data brokering, etc., on digital, you'd be shocked as to the granularity of data that you have available on direct mail in terms of household level incomes and what they do, their purchases, their possessions, and so on. So I think when you're approaching an audience with such a narrow filter, you just have to be a little bit more agile with how you choose, where do you choose to spend your money. There's one more thing I do want to highlight before, is the third is what we call crosswalk. Given that we have a media empire backing us, right? How do we funnel users from those entities, to Times Club or whatever the new brand will be? And that can be in the form of just pure media buying on these properties, but it's also taking the form of product integration where we are actually integrating ourselves into the paywalls of some of these products and incentivizing them to sign up for this app.
Amazing, amazing, and it was interesting because you mentioned off the top, fintech sometimes they have $200 cost of customer acquisition.
Mhm.
You've got some money to play with, and maybe some old school things like direct mail makes some sense.
Mhm.
Love it, absolutely love it.
And a content company to back you. That's not bad. Because I'm just thinking, a lot of that
Mm,
can work through, as you said, advertising or working into the paywall. You could imagine, oh, you really like this content, you can subscribe, and here is Times Club or whatever it's going to be called.
mhm.
So at the end of the day, you're doing a ton. And you also have to educate your users about the app, the features, the functionality. You're in early launch, correct, Vivek? Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's early days, but you want to get them excited. How do you educate them?
To be honest, this is still an evolving piece because the bank as such is launching in 3 months' time. The way we're trying to, get people excited about this, we have a wait list, within the product itself. So that gives us some early signals as to how many people would be even interested in a product like this. And we keep rotating different features in there that just to test out, what specific use cases might resonate with people. A large part of our time since we're kind of building this out has been focused on the basic product, getting the marketing infrastructure in place, and I'm currently working on a rebrand as well. This should be done in a month or so. Once that is done, we have a lot of assets to leverage. For example, timesofindia.com itself has 10 million MAUs from the US. So that is a massive audience that we can use to advantage. Ghana, which is the Spotify of India, has 1 million users in the US as well. And that is an example of where we're creating this paywall integration where if you sign up for TimeSub, you get 6 months of Ghana free. Uh, Similarly, we have Willow TV, which is a cricket streaming service based in the US. And that is again owned by the Times Group. So apart from that, we have a lot of other radio stations, etc. So the way I see this is we build out the brand, we create sort of a mainstream messaging. We use the might of the existing media empire to create that brand messaging. Then we use UA as a demand capture mechanism, and then we use the internal crosswalk piece to subsidize the CACs on Facebook, Google, which inevitably will be on the higher side.
It's a very scientific approach. It's a very
Mhm.
interesting approach, and yet it's also a very emotional and people centered approach. I love a lot about it, and it sounds super interesting. Let's end here. We always ask our experts that we interview for their top 3 tips. What are your top 3 tips for mobile marketers in the fintech space?
Ooh, top 3 tips is always a dangerous territory. How do
We'll
I
take
not?
one
How
really
do?
good one. But if you got 3, we'll take
No,
3.
I can give you three. I'm just I want to make sure I don't sound like a cliche here. So I think the first one I would say is this may sound counterintuitive, right? But if you're starting out, do what works, right? Like if you see that competitors are getting success through affiliate marketing, then don't be a hero. Do affiliate marketing first. Get your basic influx of users, see how they perform in the product, and then you can you know do your cycles and iterate from there on. Like if you're trying to get some alpha and use TikTok when it hasn't worked for anybody in this category, then I think you're just setting yourself up for failure. I think the second thing I would say is find your edge, right? So for Chime, it was something as simple as you get your paycheck 2 days early. For Dave, their thing was, hey, we'll never charge you any overdraft fees, and that became their calling card for all of their creators and their campaigns. So you need to kind of find like what is that specific edge that your product offers to your audience, and just hammer hammer on it. Once you find something that works, just like go all in on that. Uh, and the third thing is, obviously we have to monitor retention closely, right? Because you want to see it as your cohorts move through the funnel, and you want to see your retention curve flatlining at some point. That is when you know that you've reached some level of product market fit, and then you can assume your see your payback period, assume lifetime value, and see how that works out with your unit economics. So that is something you need to monitor really carefully as you're launching a new app.
Well, Peggy, I said we'd take one really good one. I think we got 3 really good ones.
I like the last one best, actually. Flatlining retention is a good thing, but I love that because it does show the product market fit. I also have to say, huge thanks for telling us more about affinity marketing as well, Vivek. And if I want to learn more about this, I can imagine others do as well. So where can other people find out more from you, about you? What's the best way?
So I have a large digital footprint. You can find me on Twitter at Vivek Girotra, and I will also be giving a talk on the subject at MAU this year. So if anyone watching or attending, it would be awesome to see you there and connect as well.
Excellent.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Vivek. It's been a real pleasure. It has been a real pleasure. It's not just another interview with another person who's talking about something. There's some depth there. There's some really interesting things that you're doing, and there's some really cool ways that you're doing it. Thank you for sharing it on Mobile Heroes Uncensored.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Peggy. It was an amazing conversation, and I look forward to connecting more at some point.
Absolutely. And I will do that on social. You will see me, Vivek. Thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And thank you to all listeners. We really do appreciate you. Hope you're enjoying it. Let us know on social if you are.
And let us know if you want to come, and we'll have you on the show. If you're a mobile hero or you know of someone who is, then fill out the interest form over at shorturl.at/JKSKT.
Also, Liftoff has a Slack for mobile heroes and people in the mobile ecosystem. There's a link on the screen, and if you're listening to the podcast, it's at info.liftoff.io/Slack-signup. It's pretty cool. There's smart people there, and you know what? They probably need you too.
And you have probably been completely blown away by all the insights on this show, and you want your transcript, and you can have it because the transcripts are over at Liftoff's website. Go to liftoff.io, click on Heroes, and then click on Podcast.
I actually personally love transcripts because I read way faster than people talk. So that's a great way to get insights really, really quickly. Until next time, this is John Katsir. Thank you so much for joining.
And this is Peggy Ann Saltz signing off for Mobile Heroes Uncensored.